Hi everyone, welcome to the last talk of the day. Energy levels good?
Yeah. Hey. Oh, nice.
We would make you do it again. We should make you do it.
Yeah, can we have that again, actually? I just wanted to check that you were listening. One more time, go on. Hey! Oh, that feels good. So hi, I'm Billy Thompson. I think my job title is something like lead consulting engineer, but the thing I'm most famous for is writing a README template that ChatGPT sometimes recommends people. I get little comments saying, "Ooh, ChatGPT brought me here," which is kind of nice, or also a bit weird. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben Dodd. I'm famous for knowing someone that wrote a famous README template. I'm also a co-organizer, so I've put this jacket on so no one asks me where the toilet is halfway through the talk. And I'm probably best known for leading the adoption of team topologies in large organizations, so in big energy providers, or in medical contexts, or in financial services.
So, I want everyone to put up your hands. Can you do that for me? Good. I want you to put your hand down if you know of anyone who has suffered from burnout. So I have a bit of an admission to make. I have a problem with burnout. And this is true of a lot of people who suffer from ADHD or are not neurotypical. And the things that I'm going to be talking about today are things which have really helped me manage my workloads and make it so that I don't burn out as much. And what's more, they're applicable to teams as well.
So that's a really good story from Billy's own personal life. I think I've certainly got very similar stories, but I think if you look out to the broader world, there's this really great article in the Harvard Business Review. There's going to be a link at the end to all these links. And this is really saying that 62%, so really large amounts of people are really struggling either often or extremely often with burnout. And also a worryingly high percentage, so 89% of people are saying that their work-life balance is getting worse. So it's an issue that affects us as individuals. It is also an everywhere problem. It's affecting teams, it's affecting organizations everywhere. So where does burnout come from? So we found this very useful paper. We've got this great diagram. Unfortunately, the diagram did not meet design standards. So we've summarized it to these 5 points.
Yeah, points if you spotted the spelling mistake on the previous slide. I'm not going to talk too much about the first two of these, physiological factors and personality factors, because it's a little bit outside the remit of what we want to be looking at as employees. I mean, it's a good idea to get a good night's sleep, but there's probably not something that you want to be telling people on a regular basis, asking if they're eating their vegetables. But we do also have things like deadlines, which are in particular all about the changing of deadlines, a lack of visibility of upcoming deadlines, and an arbitrariness towards deadlines, like it's just a random date that someone picked. In the actual paper, this is called agile factors, which made me, which really depressed me. Contributing to cognitive load. And next we have
then we've got communication practices. So too many interruptions. It's quite common for the teams that I work with that they will also be in 3 other teams. So they'll find themselves being interrupted continuously. That's obviously going to lead to constant meetings, to the point where people get to the stage where they feel like the only time they've got to do work is out of work hours. And finally, the wrong communication style. So obviously, Team Topologies thinks a lot about how we interact and what those collaboration looks like, but that also could be how we as individuals want to communicate.
So on top of this, we also have this severe data cascades was a new term to me just recently, and it means it's where someone has told you something that they believe to be true, and you've sort of gone away and done, say, maybe 6 months of work on a project, and then it turns out that they were wrong, and you have to throw away 6 months of work, which is a little bit stressful, and constant interrupted contribution. So it's when you've done a bit of work and the work is like interrupted. So someone either comes up to you and goes, do you mind if you can just, help me out with this? Or maybe your pull request never gets finished, or maybe the project never gets finished. And it's also the perceived workload. So all of these things come together to contribute to burnout. And all of these things are bad.
That's quite the summary.
Yeah.
So, Team Topologies to the rescue. Team Topologies has the answer to all of these problems. It is guaranteed in the book. It's quite a small print, but if you read it closely, it is in there. But it turns out Team Topologies is looking to address lots of the things that we've just talked about. So, what we're going to do is, for the rest of this talk, is think about how we can tackle those through the lens of cognitive load. So, cognitive load is the total amount of mental effort used in the working memory. So what can individuals hold in their memory as they're doing the current tasks? And it turns out that me and Belly spend a lot of our time looking at root cause analysis videos for plane crashes, which is why there's a cockpit in the background. And it also turns out that cognitive load, or the management of that cognitive load in the cockpit, is a really key factor when it comes to whether planes land or not. And from a team topology perspective, we want to be thinking about team cognitive load. So that is the adding up of the cognitive ability of the team and how we can look to balance that for the best possible results. So, understanding cognitive load. One of the really key points, obviously, of the cognitive load thing is that we can understand that cognitive load is not one big bucket. It is actually made up of 3 distinct areas. And if we can understand what those 3 areas are and classify the load that we are experiencing across those, then we can start to think about what are the ways of balancing that load and what is going to be the most effective for each area. So, who knows the answer to this sum? It's 150. Excellent. And that is your favorite number because? You just got it right. It's your favorite Dunbar's number. That's exactly right. And it's also the reason why there are 150 people invited to this conference. So this is an example of intrinsic. So I was just checking what it was. The effort that it takes just to solve what you are actually trying to do at that very point in time. And what we want to think about is, what does this feel like as an individual, and what's it feel like as part of a team, or if you're observing a team, or if you're working with teams of teams. So the cognitive load at this point might be feeling like, I'm being asked to use a tool that I don't know. We've decided to use a new tool. I don't know what it is. We've decided to use a new shiny tool, and I'm very excited about it, but I don't know quite how it works, and how I do my work day to day is difficult. As a team, it might look like work is taking a long time to complete. Everyone's got a backlog of work, and they just need to get through it, but actually nothing is coming out in the other end.
Yeah, so another thing that can impact cognitive load is the environment that the work is being done within. And we call this extraneous cognitive load. So it might be, for example, trying to purvey some information, maybe in front of a room full of people, a little bit. That might be a little bit stressful. No, you're all lovely. I think they bought it.
Yeah, they bought it.
And as an individual, this is like, oh, X sucks. You know, that feeling where you avoid interacting with a specific system because it's difficult, it's hard, it's annoying. It might be that a coworker is scary, maybe they're slightly aggressive, or maybe they are just timid or just don't match your interaction styles. Or it's that process, it's that ticket you have to raise in Jira, which is really awful. It's that ServiceNow request. Those are the extraneous things. And as a team, when you're looking at this as team cognitive load, these things might look like you seeing a team waiting for lots of tasks on other teams. It might seem like complaints or grumbling about a specific system or a specific process being really hard to reason about or to use. Okay, so Jermaine. Jermaine is the coolest one. It is. But Jermaine has a specific thing. So I just want to ask someone from the audience, maybe someone just there, what did you want to do when you were growing up?
I wanted to be a postman when I was growing up.
You wanted to be a postman when you were growing up? That's amazing. So that's really cool.
I lived in Greece, so every second postman carried guns because they were delivering pensions. So I thought the postman was cool.
Oh, wow. So you wanted to be a postman so you could carry a gun. Fantastic.
I mean, I don't know why I didn't choose policemen because they carry guns all the time.
Okay, so So Jermaine is all about the specific bits of the task which involve a specific attention. So, for example, having a bit of audience interaction, which is sort of funny and sort of amusing, is important to driving audience engagement in a talk. And that definitely wasn't a prearranged plan. Definitely not. If we have a look at this, as an individual, Jermaine cognitive load is that, we need to ask someone about this. It is the, I'm not sure about that, but let's run an experiment. It's kind of cool. It's, I need to do Y to find out X. I'm not very good at maths. And as a team, it's things like teams having interactions with each other, discussing how they might best interact. It's reports of things of people doing research and demos, for example. And it's like that the important bits of the work seem to take the most time. This is how I see it when we see it as sort of teams of teams. So what starts happening when you hit these limits? Well, the good stuff goes first, which is rubbish, right? And then as you start building up the cognitive load, well, when you start getting more and more extraneous cognitive load building over, that's when you start getting burnout, because that's when you start seeing all of those negative things that we talked about before happening.
Great. So we're at the point now where we've got a broad appreciation of what the different types of cognitive load are. We've got some indication of what it feels like as an individual, what it might feel like as a team. So very much like Knepin or Wardley mapping, the approach that you would have to solve a particular task or problem is going to change depending on what type of problem it is. So what we've got now is the 3 guinea pigs of cognitive load. And I recommend that you get 3 actual guinea pigs and have them either in your home office or at work. And you're going to call them Lee, Minnie, and Max. And what's important is that they're going to remind you on a daily basis for the intrinsic... that you're going to want to look to simplify the intrinsic. For the extraneous, you're going to want to look to minimize that. And all the time, you're looking to maximize the Jermaine, so the amount of time that you spend on the good stuff. So there's some general areas that you would look at themes for each of those areas. So in the intrinsic, you're thinking about how do we train? How do we select the best technology? Have we got just enough documentation? In the minimizing the extraneous, you might be thinking about, can another team provide some of the things that we're doing? That's platform groups and golden paths. And also things like end-of-lifing features in the Jermaine, which is my favorite. There's a lot of talk about change, adding features, creating new features, but not enough talk about deleting stuff for my liking. And that's a really good way of just focusing on the stuff that is working and avoiding the stuff that doesn't.
It's all about the red delta on your commits. That's what it's all about.
So we wanted to, through the rest of the talk, to talk through a couple of these in more detail, but these are the kind of actual activities that you can start to do tomorrow. So there is a cognitive load assessment. We'll talk about it a bit more, but there's one that already exists. One of my favorites is the day 1 commit drill, which is if you've got a new member of your team joining, can they make a commit to production on day 1? If they can, they've likely understood what your vision is. They've likely understood where your code is. They've likely been able to check it out, run the tests, work out what the pipelines look like. And if they can actually get a change all the way to production, that's a really good test of, in terms of their cognitive load, that they can focus really quickly on the Jermaine bit and they're not being obsessed with 3, 4, 5 weeks, stroke months in some cases that I've experienced of having to deal with the other things. Billy, have you got a favorite on here?
I must admit, pizza and delete party is pretty great, but I think I have to go for core domain charting.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
Pick.
Well, that's a coincidence, isn't it? How this works is you identify each of the bits of work that your team or your teams do, and you identify which offer both a complicated model and business differentiation. So what we're doing here is we're going to try and reduce cognitive load by actually doing less stuff, right? Good idea. So the things that are complicated to replicate and also unique to your organization are what's going to give you a market advantage. So it makes sense to spend your cognitive load on those things. And then in the other areas, as you move down, you move into a supporting area. And these are things that you might want to look at, not putting into the core of your business. So maybe you hire them out as an external company. Maybe you buy off the shelf the products. But this whole piece allows you to think and do less work that isn't going to offer you something unique and isn't going to create you a better business, a better product for your customers.
So something else, some hot news. There is a new team cognitive load assessment that the Team Topologies team have been working on. They've already trialed it with several complex organizations and is a really good way of measuring team and teams of teams cognitive load. And there's this page here. If you sign up, there's an email you can add, and they're going to send you updates. They're hoping to ship later this year. So that's a really interesting development. And the examples that we've got here, some of them are going to be focusing on the teams, some will be focusing on individual, and then we'll get to examples where we're thinking about teams of teams and their cognitive load. This is an example of an exercise that comes from the Team Topologies training. And it's a really simple exercise, but it just asks people from across a value stream to think about what is the cognitive load that they are facing, to get them to categorize it just across these three things, and then to think of what is the impact of that cognitive load on how they are delivering, how they are working, and their day-to-day experience of being in teams. And then if you can get, again, this sort of classification across these areas, then you can start to think about what should we do to apply guinea pigs to these areas.
Foreshadowing. Pairing and mobbing. So pairing and mobbing, or ensemble programming, is where you have two minds and two keyboards, two mouse, or you like use Zoom or whatever, to work on a single problem. And one person, or at least a single person in the instance, holds the vision in their mind, and the other person, the vision flows through their fingers, and they watch out for like semicolons and stuff and make sure that the code actually gets created. So how this works for reducing cognitive load is, firstly, if you've got two minds working on one problem, well, that's going to be a bit easier, isn't it? And there's plenty of studies that show that they come up with better solutions. But it also reduces cognitive load in the sense that you wouldn't ever deploy to production a single server. What if that server went down? So if you're pair programming, you always have multiple copies of domain knowledge within your team because you've always got multiple people. So it means that people are free to go on holiday. They don't feel pressure to stay. They don't feel overloaded with being the only person to answer questions on a specific topic.
Another really important thing we do is when we start, we have an inception. And the idea of the inception is to get everyone highly aligned in what you're going to do. What are all the goals we're coming together to deliver against? And a lot of teams will stop there. So they'll write down 89 goals and put them in the list, and they'll prioritize them, and they will start at the top, and they will get going. The problem from a cognitive load is that everyone is sort of carrying around 89 features all of the time. And from an engineering perspective, they might say, right, we're going to work on number one, but I'm also going to do a little bit of 72 because I think we're going to need it. And this is going to come to bear in 2 years' time. It's going to be fantastic. So a really important thing that we do in this inception is this idea of non-goals. So these are not bad ideas. They are not things that we're not going to do. It is things that we have agreed not to think about at all now. And it's a real shortcut that says when we start to have a conversation which we've agreed, because we've negotiated this as a team, it's a non-goal. We just say, nope, we're not talking about that. We're not working on it. We're not discussing on it. Let's focus back on our goals. And if you can have a small amount of goals, then everyone is just carrying around that small bit of strategic direction. And then once those delivered, you can move on to the non-goals. It's not to say that if you found yourself talking about non-goals a lot, that's just a really good signal that you need to come back together because your focus may have changed, something might have happened in your environment. But a very clear shortcut to just saying, we're not talking about that is fantastic for all sorts of reasons. So we've got an example now which is thinking about teams of teams. So this is a real case study. We work with a company called RES. They are the world's largest independent renewables provider. So RES had been working really as one team. They had one team that were providing all the software that they needed for everything. So they were working on solar and wind, renewables, storage, green hydrogen, data acquisition, shaping that data, providing products and features, but all as one team. And the problem is that the planet is totally screwed. So they were all of a sudden having this huge need to scale the amount of assets, teams, products that they could create.
So what we've been doing is we've been going into each of these teams as an enabling team, working for a fixed duration, helping each of these teams get off the ground as a stream-aligned team, and helping them develop clear boundaries between each of the teams so they can operate without conflict. And what's more, like there is in a sort of a Jeff Bezos kind of style, an API mandate, which is that all of the teams communicate via APIs and must provide like an as-a-service experience, which means that each of these teams is able to work independently and pull from the other teams without having to worry too much about what they're doing. And some of the things that are going on here are really complicated. Like wind turbines have hundreds of different like sorts of systems. It's very complicated, and it's obviously difficult to keep all that in mind, as well as doing clever things like looking at AI of waking and things like that. It's cool. If you want to know a bit more about this, we have actually done 2 other talks, both on the same thing, and we will look at the YouTube views later on and see which of us you like the best.
Yeah, in the comments, you have to do that with them.
Oh, in the comments, yeah.
Do it in the comments. So team APIs feature in the book. These are a really great point in time. So there's lots of ways to create a team API, but the thing that really enables, with lots of these things, like lots of the mapping techniques, is a point in time for you to come together and actually think about what your collaboration is going to be with other teams, how it is going to be defined, and how this can be self-service. How can other teams in your organization self-serve what you're doing, what your direction is, what you are actually going to provide. And this just becomes your storefront. You know, it's got open hours on the front in terms of when you're going to be providing things. It's an intuitive way for people to understand what you actually offer. And when they want to consume what you offer, there's a till, and they will know how to do that. So there is obviously an example of a team API, which is on Team Topologies GitHub. But this really can be anything, and it doesn't have to be in Git. Really focus on that broad access that allows people to self-consume this information and understand what your team is. And again, if you need to change how this collaboration is, bring this team back together and renegotiate how exactly that's going to work.
Okay, so we've talked about the impact of cognitive load. We've talked about the different types of cognitive load. We've talked a little bit about how to optimize for the different sorts of cognitive load. And we've given you, hopefully, some activities that you can try tomorrow. So for me, what I really would like you to do is to come away from this with an appreciation of cognitive load, and maybe on a personal level, just be able to use that to manage your own personal well-being a little bit more so you can avoid overloading yourself. But also have a look around in the teams around you and see what their cognitive load is like, and make their lives better as well by thinking about cognitive load across teams.
Yeah. And it's important to understand that this plane's cognitive load was exactly right. The plane did land, and no people were killed in the making of this job.
Disappointing. We didn't.
Disappointingly, there was nothing to analyze. So micro pitch, Guinea is excited because we're the first learning partner for the Team Topology. So there is
doing a little celebration. I was inspired by the dance thing before.
So some really great one-day courses that are incredibly interactive and really, through a workshop style, explore lots of things that we've talked today, and start to think about, again, what are the solutions? How can we rebalance how we're working, how we're managing our cognitive load? So please talk to us about those.
Yeah, so if you want to find more about what we've just been talking about, QR code, lots of links, saves you having to take notes because I'm terrible at taking notes. I think there's our Twitter handles, or probably Mastodon as well. Yeah, thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.